first.
Yeah, don't play queen c4.
Because that would actually allow
the dark square perpetuals back in the game.
White would have to play queen f1 and lose one of those pawns and potentially...
Well, king h7 was actually played by Jan to avoid those types of lines where Magnus just sacrifices either pawn, but heading into any king upon ending, if you imagine the queen's off the board, easily winning, because this king has to come over and white mops up everything here. So,
but the b pawn is the one that runs now. b4 and b5 next if black does nothing.
Yep.
And if black plays queen e4 to play b5, queen to b1, check. Well, white has various ways, of course, of slowly pushing those pawns up because, let's say queen to e4, I can play queen to d2 now. Now I want to push the d pawn up. Both of those pawns are going up the board. Queen to d5,
here, but then I give check,
queen d3, and now b5.
Yeah.
And slowly but surely, white
it gets surgical from this point.
Marches up the board.
Kind of like the queen on d1 better.
I did like the queen on d1 better. I just felt like this would have been the ultimate deflating move, queen d1.
It just removes all of the worry that you have. Your king falling victim to a check, and you just start pushing your pawns.
But okay. Magnus will do what he does anyway and convert this one. We have actually just reached move 40, as you saw there, which means at time control, both players get an hour added back onto their clock. That was not magic. That was by design. So Magnus's 3 minutes turns to an hour and 3 minutes, and Jan with an hour and 17 once again. But at this point, not really a relevant talking point.
I think even without a d4 pawn, white wins very easily.
Yeah.
Just by playing b4, and the king will run to the center. So usually queen endings with a pass pawn, an outside pass pawn, and nothing special happening on the other side of the board. And here the pawns are kind of fixed. There's nothing really to speak of in terms of black's counterplay. Usually an outside pass pawn wins the game. So even if Magnus somehow lost that pawn, which is hard to imagine, I don't think that it would change the valuation. It would just change the amount of time that this game would take.
Yeah. Well, again, we are back to a similar situation we've been in many times. Magnus Carlsen thinking at the board in a winning position. Jan Nepomniachtchi not at the board. Understandably, at this point, doesn't want to sit there and look at his lost position, but unfortunately, it may not matter.
Yeah, no, Magnus, I think he's doing the right thing here, though. And it's a great lesson for chess players of all levels, and in particular for newer chess players. If the world champion has a completely winning position, and he's sitting and thinking, trying to find the objective best move, that's maybe something we should all do.
Maybe everybody else should do that too. Yeah. It's hard work to win chess games, right? And people, obviously, some people have talked about Magnus being a genius, but also I think he is the hardest working chess player in the world, and you see that in moments like this, and it's why he wins more chess games than everyone else in the world. So
there is a saying in chess, the hardest thing in chess is to win a one position.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if that's the hardest thing in chess, but it's hard in the sense that that's when people feel like their job is done.
Right.
And it very often isn't. A lot of one positions, maybe even most one positions, are at some point spoiled.
Right.
Even positions where someone's up 4 pawns, right?
Yep.
even those positions, and I wonder who spoiled such a position.
I don't know. Maybe this guy.
Who could spoil 4 pawns up and then tweet about it? Yeah. No, but you make a good point, Fabi, because even if the game is still won, when we review it afterwards, you look at it with the computer, it's amazing how often chess games that you were winning, at some point, you gave your opponent a chance, right? Yeah. Whether they always took it or not is another question, and it shows how hard it is to win.
You realize that with experience. Very often, winning positions that are actually won in the game, there's usually one moment when the opponent has a defensive chance.
Right.
And that goes for both sides. Like when you've played for many years, you realize that more and more analyzing your games, even at the top level, you see that.
Yep.
Maybe there's only one moment, but there is that defensive chance for the opponent. And that also helps you mentally realize that if you keep resisting, if you don't give up, at some point you will probably have that chance. If you take it, then you might save a position that would have been lost.
Right.
And if that applies to the top level, I'm sure it applies to every level in chess.
Right.
the question is, of course, it's difficult to know when that moment is. Defending it is still a super difficult skill to build up and to develop. But if you do it, you realize I'm starting to save so many positions that I would have lost, and it's really changing my results. Yep. That's one of the things I think people could improve on the most at every level to improve their results is never giving up.
Shows the discipline that Magnus has too. No matter what, he's not thinking about anything else that's going on.
Clearly not. He didn't put his jacket on the back of the chair in a nice way.
Yeah, he didn't even. He taking his time, took the jacket off. Took 40 moves for him to take his jacket off, but he ultimately does so here in Game 8. And again, just showing an example that he's not going to even let his opponent have a single sliver of a thought that he might hold this game. And also, there's a psychological edge. We keep talking about the fact that the match might be over on some practical levels. The truth is, it's not over until it's over. And Magnus, I think, doesn't mind sitting at the board in a winning position. And there is something to that.
I think that's part of it, that maybe you want to just prolong the suffering of your opponent. But I really do think that he is just double, triple, quadruple checking, that he does not allow some sudden checks, some repetition, some perpetual check possibilities. And it's just, why waste this moment? Where if objectively you're winning, you just gained an hour on the clock. So why win in 5 minutes and potentially spoil the victory versus spend an hour and make sure that you win the game? So I think he's doing the absolute right thing.
Yep.
I think he's probably even a little jittery and nervous.
Right.
Because this is a critical moment. If he somehow does not win this game, now Jan is the one who's like, wait a second, I have chances still.
Right.
Magnus makes mistakes. I handed him such a great opportunity, and he didn't make the most of it. So I think that Magnus Carlsen, he's way too experienced, he's way too strong, and he has just a great head on his shoulders, both in terms of chess, generally speaking, and in a moment like this, to rush, because there is no need to.
Yeah, I think nerves is an important word that Robert used, because even though we think of Magnus, and I think strong players in general, as being super cool and calm under pressure, even Magnus, and especially at these stakes, gets nervous. And he understands that this game might be the match.
Yeah.
It's not over yet, of course, but a 2-game lead, he's probably thinking already that this is his match.
Mm-hmm.
So he doesn't want to spoil his moment. I'm sure that he is nervous, despite the fact that he has complete control in a totally winning position, and he just wants to clean this game up with no counterplay, without letting anything get out of control. So he's just looking for the most accurate way. He has plenty of time, which means that he can basically calculate this to the end, because Black's counterplay, if there is any, is easy to spot.
Right.
Like after b4 or whatever move he's looking at, there's only a few moves that Black has that stops b5, and so he can go through the moves to make sure that he calculates this out as accurately as possible. Also, when you're playing at that stage, and it's already been a tough match, they've played a number of long games, including the longest game in World Championship history, your head starts to spin. I'm sure this happens to everyone, where just the pressure of the moment and the tiredness gets to you, and you're not feeling physically like you normally do. So in those moments, it's good to calm down and remind yourself that you have complete control. And for the moment, you haven't made a mistake, so make sure that you don't get careless and make a mistake.
Right.
Sometimes it's important to calm down and not rush with decisions. We already saw in this match how important rushing or not rushing can be.
And I think he's doing exactly what you're saying, Fabi. He's trying to conclude this game in his head right now. He's trying to map out a road to victory on the spot where there's no chance for Jan. And he made this little facial expression that led me to believe that he didn't quite find it. He's going probably 25 moves deep. And people often ask this question, oh, how much can you calculate?
Right.
And in positions like this, end games, you often calculate 20, 25 moves at the grandmaster level. So he went queen d3 check. He brings his queen behind the pawn, and he is either getting ready to push the pawn immediately or cover the first rank and then push the pawn. But he spent quite a lot of time because he wants to perfect this endgame.
Good stuff. And on that note, Robert, you asked that question, how deep is Magnus thinking? People often ask that question. We actually had that question come in from chat earlier, which reminds me, I want to remind everybody, while we have all of you here before this game ends, that 10 lucky fans will actually get an opportunity to have a private lesson with Fabiano Caruana. It's private in a group setting as we debut our new feature, Classroom, a tool that's rolling out to connect coaches and students around the world forevermore on the interwebs. It's going to be amazing, and Fabiano Caruana debuts it on December 13th. 10 of you will get at least one question answered. I will be the maestro on that day. I'll make sure everyone gets at least one question answered. So all you have to do is take at least one video lesson in Fabiano's new series that he did on his road to the World Championship in 2018, which was an amazing video series regardless. You should go check it out. And then tweet or Insta a screenshot as proof that you did so. On that note, I want to remind everybody, too, before we take a very short break and then probably bring this thing to a close, that when this game ends, our post-show begins. We have several guests coming up. Let's remind everybody who they are. We have Levon Aronian. Once again, we'll let Lev and Fabi discuss what they think about Team Jan at this point and the state of the World Chess Championship match. We'll have Jan Ludwig-Hammer as usual, and then we will have Ludwig today, double question mark for the memes, because Ludwig is doing everything he can to evade the question, who is his favorite person in chess, Magnus Carlsen or Robert Hess? We're going to leave you on that cliffhanger because it might lead to some fun talk and chat. Maybe there's a twist ending, a third person that's becoming his new favorite person in chess. I don't know.
Is it you, Danny?
We'll be right back. You ready?
Yeah.
Your knight's on f7. Where can it go?
F7, D6, E8, G7, H5, G3, E2, C1, B3,
Stop.
A5.